Hi, like you said, I'm Adrienne Crider with Modjeski and Masters. Since I went last, most of my slides have already been covered, but hopefully there's some new stuff in there. So I'll start with going over some historical information, current practices, factors involved in vessel collisions, and a few ideas for future research. Start with the Sunshine Skyway collapse, which at the event drew global attention on the dangers from vessel collision. And at the time, there was no unified vessel collision for bridge designers at the time of this incident, but it stirred significant research that evolved into the modern design codes we have today. So many of these have been pointed out in previous presentations. I'd like to point out the work of the LADOTD criteria for vessel collision design, which was some of the basis for the AASHTO guide specifications in 1991. You can't hear me, can you? Okay, how that? Better? Okay, thanks. Okay, so any bridges built before the 1980s are not necessarily are not built to the current vessel design codes, and it was up to the owner to decide whether they would need to be protection added or of the risk of their particular structure. The current practice has three design methods. Method 1, which is deterministic. Method 2, the probabilistic method. And method 3, the cost-benefit analysis. I'm not going to talk about method 3 much today. So method 1, the deterministic method, there's a limit of when you can use it for like smaller channels and mostly for barges. It is more traditional approach than most designers are used to. It's written in a similar method as the rest of the code. You look at the number of vessels that use the channel, pick either the top 95% or the top 90%, and design your protection system or piers for that load. Method 2 is more probabilistic and involves significantly more information. It takes into account the number of vessels and probability factors, and as described on the other presentations. And the annual frequency of collapse is rate of return of 1 over 10,000 years for critical or essential bridges, or 1 over 1,000 years for typical bridges. Things to note for the method 2 analysis are that the results are only as good as the data is collected. But the data needed is vessel data that would come from multiple sources, including the analysis of ports and harbors that are nearby. Could discuss with local mariners and also bridge operators if there's any historical records of previous incidents in the area with the bridge or any nearby structures. You would look into any future commercial or industrial development along the channel, that this development might either increase or decrease any navigation traffic. And you'd also need hydraulic and waterway data, such as water depths, current speed, or a future scour. And since many parameters go into this calculation, you'll need to know which ones are more sensitive, which ones are more sensitive and which one more effective to decreasing the risk. And some combination of the assumptions may result in pier capacities that are way lower than the forces of a large vessel strike. So engineers would need to look at these forces and the results and make sure we're not proposing something that is not enough to protect the structure. For example, for a design build project, when there's a push to do it as cheaply and as possible, while it still might technically meet the code, it's not what was intended. And so how to implement the code for existing bridges? We would start with phase 1, which involves a risk assessment and vulnerability study of the existing infrastructure. And then phase 2 would be, if needed, to implement countermeasures. So the phase 1 would be to check if there's any previous assessments and does it need to be updated since the bridge has been built or since this previous report was done. Have there been any changes in vessel traffic or waterway or navigation considerations? Consider all the factors of vessel collision risk, including the channel and location of the structures. You should try to attempt as best as you can to forecast future traffic. Will there be a new harbor being built or any new commercial development? And it should be performed by engineers with experience in the area, as well as mariners. You'll need to talk to the people actually using the channel and see what their issues are with the structure. And then if it's determined that countermeasures will need to be implemented, there's different options of how these countermeasures could be installed, either dolphins, fender systems, earthen islands, or strengthening the pier itself. Involve coordination with the Army Corps, which would be in charge of things like dredging and making the channel, and the Coast Guard, which would permit the different ships to use the channel. Any countermeasures should be installed with information from the local geotechs to verify that any construction doesn't affect the existing structure, as well as provides a robust protection system that provides the length of service that's required. Okay. As you can see, the factors of annual frequency of collapse are all tangled together to calculate the different factors. The vessel collision characteristics go into multiple factors and other items like this, all going together to the risk of vessel collision. As the bridge owner can only affect the bridge characteristics, either by strengthening the bridge or locating the piers if it's a new structure, or providing a protection system. The bridge owner doesn't necessarily have any impact on navigation characteristics or waterway characteristics. But if only changing the bridge characteristics cannot provide enough protection, then is there any way to affect these other methods? Then who is responsible for that? Vessel traffic characteristics would be in charge of, would be involved with shipping companies and port authorities. Waterway characteristics would be the Army Corps and the Coast Guard, and navigation traffic characteristics, again, the Coast Guard and maritime trade associations. And for larger vessels, we might need to look into coordination between multiple of these entities to provide a safe travel for both vessels and the people using the bridges. And the size of container ships has increased dramatically from the 80s when the vessel protection studies began to almost, and vessels today for ocean-going vessels can be over 200,000 deadweight tonnage. And to provide countermeasures for these large vessels, it might not be cost-effective or even feasible. So what other options do we have? One option might be to provide tug assist. This might help with reducing the factor of vessels. This can be required on like this difficult channel. This is in Virginia. But who pays for that? Is that something the shipping companies pay for or the ports? It doesn't seem like it'd be something that pays for by the bridge owners, but maybe a cost-sharing arrangement. I don't have an answer for that. That was just a question. So we have a bunch of people that we need to cooperate with the public entities at AASHTO, FHWA, and the Coast Guard versus the private entities of shipping companies, vessel designers, and port authorities. And somehow we'll need to balance these competing interests to provide safe travel for all the users of the channel. Okay. And since we're at ACI, I put in a couple that I thought were interesting construction photos of concrete protection system. So this is the dolphin structures for Fall River in Massachusetts. They have 60-foot diameter sheet pile cells. Sheet piles around the diameter filled with granular material and the concrete cap, and a construction photo showing all the radial rebar. This bridge also had a steel pile fender with concrete caps on the top. The bottom piece is a precast, it's about 1 foot thick soffit. So the precast soffit was placed over 3 or 4 fender piles, and then the rest of the fender blocks were placed on top of that. They're about 13 feet tall. And this is a modular design of I-10. These bridge piers had steel piles installed around the perimeter, and then concrete modular blocks were slid in place in between the piles. And the intent is after a collision, the damaged portion can come out and a new precast section come in. And I know this has happened at least once.